So, talking about Punarvasu, let's backtrack for a moment, because one thing I wanted to add just very briefly with Ardra, right? With Ardra, as we're talking about the process of evolution that the nakshatras represent, with Ardra, it's very much about the decision of how we're going to pursue our course, you know, and being given a will or a strength with which to direct that. When we get to Punarvasu, the divine impulse, now self-conscious and being directed in a particular direction, becomes nourished once again, like we had happen in Kritika and Rohini, right? Punarvasu also is symbolized by a house. A house being a place of resting, a place of coming together. And that's very apropos of the energy of Punarvasu. It's about coming together and letting things gather, so to speak. Right? The deity that's connected to Punarvasu is Aditi, which is the mother of the demigods. She was also the mother of the Vasus. And we need to take a look at what Punarvasu, you know, actually means, which basically Punar means once again, and Vasu means ray of light. So there's a returning to the original state, as we were saying, with the divine impulse, now becoming conscious and directed. So Punarvasu, returning to the original state. And what begins to happen is forces are pulled together, as per with the Vasus. And let's touch on the Vasus. There are 8 of the Vasus, and we'll begin to see how this really begins to support the process of evolution. The first one being Apas. Apas provides the foundation for manifestation. Apas, as we'll see later when we get to Purva Ashada, is a water deity, which I like saying, I like explaining as being related to the causal nature of the soul. So here is the soul coming into manifestation. What am I here for? That's what Apas is for. Mm-hmm. Then we have Dhruva. Dhruva is the pole star. And what Dhruva, one of the Vasus, does is it gives gravitational attraction and cohesion to the concept of manifestation. Then we have Soma. Soma being the nectar, but Soma is also related to sap, which nourishes plants. And in terms of the individual consciousness, it nourishes the psyche and guides that psyche or the individual consciousness on the path to fulfillment and enlightenment. Dara, another one of the Vasus, is the supportive principle that's connected to the intrinsic law in all things, how all things function. Dara gives us the ability to understand those things. Bhava, another one of the Vasus, is the power to persevere. Anila, the god of the wind, the wind is about change, having the capacity to change when change is necessary. Anala, the god of fire, or one of the names of one of the fire gods, being willing to purify when it's necessary. Pratyusha, being the morning sun. There again, we have the divine impulse, the purification of oneself and, becoming once again that divine seed. And Prabhas, splendor and luster. So the process of Punarvasu gives one the capacity, if you consider it following upon Mrigashira and Ardra, it gives the capacity for things to come together as they are being directed in a particular direction, right? So that's the connection with the deity that's connected with Punarvasu. The Shakti of Punarvasu, not surprising, is the power to gain wealth and substance. Mm-hmm. The wealth here not being, purely material wealth. The wealth being, one's prosperity. Prosperity, the Latin roots the word prosperity, prospero, that which is beneficial for the spirit. right? So the power to gain wealth and substance towards that particular aspect. The basis above from the heavens being wind or air, right? The capacity to change where necessary. The basis below being wetness or rain, the ability to nourish. We need rain in order to nourish the plants. The result being the revitalization of plants. You had a thought there.
Yeah, it's just interesting. As I was thinking about the Shakti, for example, the power to gain wealth and substance, the first thing that popped in my mind was that then whatever planet or point happens to be in this particular nakshatra, then that might be something that we would look to find our own prosperity in, or our own sense of fulfillment, number one. And then as we were looking through the basis above, the basis below, and the result, I find this fascinating because I run into people every now and then that are very fixated on doing things a certain way and consistently always doing them the same way. And even if it's over hundreds of years of time, it's as if we can't change because that would be sort of denigrating what's come before. But with this idea of prosperity and gain of wealth and gain of substance, and that we need to have that capacity to change when necessary. So the basis above of wind or air, when possibly evolution's coming about. The basis below wetness or rain, or the ability to nourish that change. And then the result from making appropriate change results in, as it says here, the revitalization of plants, or the revitalization of those things which can further nourish us. These are just some thoughts that came up as I was thinking about, when you think of a planet in that nakshatra, it might be a planet where you have to maybe be a little more flexible or change from time to time, and kind of keep it alive within your consciousness versus always sticking to the how things have always been with that planet. So being more adaptable in order to produce wealth or substance or inner prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is a good way of looking at it. And, another interesting thought, thinking of some of the planets as they might be placed in Punarvasu. Let's say, for instance, Mars happened to be poorly supported, and Mars happened to be in Punarvasu. The person might become very impatient because Punarvasu's process is one of letting things come together. It's not necessarily one of action, dependent upon, what sector of Punarvasu Mars might be in. So Mars could get very impatient with that particular process. Mm-hmm. As per what you were saying just then, if the person is used to things working out in a particular way and they're unwilling to learn, then they could, get really impatient with the process of change that's going on, and, therefore, get really frustrated.
Right.
But perhaps if they were, just willing to kind of surrender to the process and let things, move in a smooth manner, then it actually flow.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah. So we were, I don't know if we touched on the Gunas in case we didn't.
That's why I interrupted you. So yes.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine. The three Gunas connected with Punarvasu is Rajasic at its basis, at its foundation, right? So very swift-moving, passionate energy at its basis that it builds upon with Sattvic energy. If you consider the concept of, I feel this drive or this impulse to move in a certain direction, but let's look at this from a state of awareness and see if this is, the level from which I need to act from, or if I need to practice more discrimination rather than going off with all guns blazing, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And then once that Sattvic process has happened, then the Rajasic energy is once again applied towards a specific pursuit, because as we'll see, the primary motivation of Punarvasu is artha, or directed activity towards a particular goal.
Right.
The ruling planet of Punarvasu is Jupiter, expansion. But the expansion that needs to happen is from a space of letting it come together, using wisdom, applying wisdom to the process. No surprise that the association with Punarvasu is Brahma, the creative aspect
Right.
of the divine.
Okay, so with this nakshatra, do you mind if I throw another planet at you for?
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay,
Please do.
so if we're thinking about, let's say, the sun. If we're thinking about the sun in this nakshatra, just the sun by its very nature, not necessarily looking at the house lords yet, but just based on what the sun represents, how might we think about or interpret the sun in this particular nakshatra? Or do you feel it's really important to really know what the house it rules over is?
No, not necessarily. You can also look at it from the particular planet. Well, let's look at the sun, sun being exceptionally brilliant, but also being prone to ego or pride.
Yes.
So to speak, right? Punarvasu can really help to keep that pride or ego in check, right? Because rather than allowing oneself to come across in a very intense manner, as per a sun that might not be very positively supported, one instead would go, well, I need to allow this to take some time to come together, dependent upon what the sun was being directed towards. But let's look at the more spiritual nature of the sun, right? It can really provide nourishment for the soul and the path that the individual is meant to move upon.
Right.
If it's placed in Punarvasu and, being very well supported.
So this thought just occurred to me when it comes to planets in nakshatras and considering the ruler of the nakshatra. Does it take on any kind of different flavor or quality if, let's say talking about the sun, if the sun is in Punarvasu and Jupiter happens to be in Leo? I mean, I know that's going to be good for Jupiter in that the sun is a friend to Jupiter, but I'm just curious if there's anything more to look at in regards to seeing that kind of exchange, being one planet in a nakshatra and then the ruler of that nakshatra being in the sign of the planet that's in that nakshatra.
Most definitely. You definitely have a level of mutual exchange going on. That would be a very important thing that you needed to look at in that person's chart. Building upon what you just said, let's say, for instance, the sun was in Punarvasu, ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter happened to be in Kritika, which is ruled by the sun. That also would be very powerful.
Okay, and so
if that person happened to be in a sun Jupiter dasha bhukti period, then you'd be looking at
Okay. So, and I'm assuming that with this kind of particular combination, that would make the energies of that nakshatra as they're channeled through those planets work more positively.
Again, dependent upon the avastas or strengths of the planets. Just looking at it in a very simple, surface level, yes, it would be very powerful.
Okay. And are there situations like, would we also, and again, this might be taking it too far, but you can let me know, would there also be situations where that would work possibly to a detriment? For example, if we had, say, sun in a nakshatra ruled by Saturn and Saturn in a nakshatra ruled by the sun, since those are mutual enemies, would that be more problematic, or would there be still some sort of positive coupling there because they were in each other's signs?
Well, let's look at the concept of, sure, Sun and Saturn being inimical towards each other. But if both of those planets, happen to be in, very well supported, then the individual might find that resistance that Saturn is going to apply is actually going to be very beneficial for them.
Okay, so
let's say for instance, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead in terms of our nakshatras, but let's say in terms of the sun being an Anuradha, which each a person appropriate boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say you've got somebody who's very solar by nature, but they have no respect for other people's boundaries.
Right.
If the sun happened to be, very well supported by being an Anuradha, then the person might learn how to keep that in check. And if Saturn happened to be in Kritika, right, the person might go, well, sure, I've got to be true to myself, but I also have to be aware of how being true to myself might impact upon other people.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
this is not the way we're describing this is definitely we're not applying the same kind of principles as we would if we were looking at the Lajatati Avashtas of starvation and delight. This is simply if a planet's in another nakshatra and that planet is well supported and they are mutually exchanging. If both those planets are well supported, then they have the potential to assist each other in their goals versus canceling each other's goals out. Correct?
Exactly. But if there actually happened to be starvation between those two planets going on, then you'd be,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'd be looking at some problems manifesting in association with that.
Okay, that makes sense. So I just wanted to be clear that it is a different concept than, say, what we'd be looking at with typical Lajatati Avashtas. This is a different kind of concept.
It's a different kind of concept. In other words, in terms of the sun being in Saturn's nakshatra and Saturn being in the sun's nakshatra.
Right.
Right. So that wouldn't necessarily apply starvation to the two of them. The starvation, obviously, would be something separate.
Right.
If that happened to exist in the chart, then that would be different.
Yeah, if that happened to exist in the chart in relationship to the signs, not the nakshatras. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. I just wanted to be clear on that because, there's often the idea that people have, and I used to have it too, of having mutual exchanges, having, say, Jupiter and Venus' sign and Jupiter and Venus' sign and Venus and Jupiter sign, as though that's always a good thing, having these mutual exchanges. But through Lajatati Avashtas, you learn that, well, Venus could be starving Jupiter in that regard. So that initial idea actually seems to apply a little bit better, possibly having an exchange within the nakshatras, not necessarily always an exchange within the rashis or the houses themselves.
Right, exactly. Right. I mean, obviously the sun would still experience some discomfort with those Saturnian processes.
Right.
But how that discomfort or difficulty would be dealt with would be determined by, the particular support that planet had through the Lajatati Avastas and such.
Okay, good. Just wanted to take a little segue there, or if that's the right word, I don't know. We wanted to take a little detour to kind of go over that. So good. Well,
that was a good point. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Good.
Yeah.
Are there any thoughts on this particular nakshatra, or would you like to move on to the next one?
I think we're ready to move on to Pusha.
Okay, excellent.